Hello, I'm Lauren with IndoorGardening.com, and today we're going to talk about how to take care of your Antherium plants. Antherium plants are often referred to as flamingo flowers and tail flowers because of the way their vibrant, beautiful flowers look. Along with their stunning foliage, these plants are highly sought after for their vibrant, heart-shaped flowers that come in a range of colors from red, pink, white, to purple and green. Antherium plants are very popular indoor plants and they require proper care to thrive. Today we're going to go over everything about Antherium houseplant care, including the ideal growing conditions, watering, fertilizing techniques, common pests and disease, and even the propagation methods. Antherium get a bad rap for being really difficult to care for plants, and the reason for this is because they have a lot of specific requirements, but once you learn their specific requirements, they really do become much easier care plants. Like with all of our care guides, the first thing that we want to do is talk about the origin of Antherium. When you know the origin of your plant, it makes it so much easier to mimic those same growing conditions in your home so that you can have a happy, beautiful, thriving plant that's not struggling. Antherium are native to the rainforests of South America, specifically Colombia and Ecuador. They like it very, very warm down there. They're beautiful epiphytic plants that can grow in the crevices of trees, and they can have stunning foliage with dark leaves and glittering veination, or they will have beautiful, vibrant color blooms that wow everyone they see. They became popular in the 1930s and their numbers have only grown since. Now they have over 1,000 different cultivars available for you to choose from, both for their flowers and for their foliage. Lighting for Antherium is very, very particular. They cannot handle bright, direct light. If you shove them in afternoon light, their leaves will crisp up. They need bright, indirect light. So if you have that big, beautiful afternoon window, pull a sheer curtain over it and that's going to be perfect for your Antherium. If you give them low light, they will not grow very well. They will grow very slowly if they grow at all, so you want to make sure that you're giving them that bright indirect light. Direct morning light is perfect. If you have a window where the sun is just coming up, put that Antherium right in that window. It's going to love it. It's going to love life there. If you don't have a room with a window or your windows are a little bit too much or not enough, definitely make sure to get some sort of artificial grow light. We have a whole video on demystifying grow lights for you, so definitely take a look at that if you're not sure what to get. If your Antherium does not receive enough light, it will drop leaves continuously until it has a certain number that it can sustain based on the amount of light that it gets. So usually that ends up being just one leaf or no leaves, depending on how bad the lighting is. So definitely make sure that you're paying attention to the lighting. It's very, very critical to these plants. Remember, they're used to being down south in tropical rainforests, getting bright tropical light shining between foliage down on them. They are epiphytic plants, so they grow on the trees and they get quite a bit of light doing that. They are not the low light plants that a lot of people think of them are, and that's where a lot of problems come in. Temperatures for Antherium is pretty simple. Ecuador, Colombia, very warm tropical places. Antherium do not like the cold. They are not frost tolerant. They like to stay in between 60 and 80 degrees temperatures. They do not really like to go very much beyond that. They can handle higher temperatures better than lower temperatures. So if you have to pick the lesser of all evils, definitely go with the higher temperatures. Do not let them drop below 60 to 55 degrees. They will definitely start dropping leaves and eventually your plant will not make it. So what does your Antherium like to grow in? They're actually epiphytic plants like we talked about before. They grow on trees. So they're used to growing on bark and moss, and you can mimic that same environment in their pots. You do not have to use potting soil. If you do use a potting soil mix, make sure that you are heavily amending it and adding in chunky substrates so that way it is a very airy mixture. They're used to absorbing all the nutrients with their roots from the air around them while they cling onto trees. So sitting in a very thick soil that's just going to kind of crush their roots and not allow very much air like a normal potting mix does, they're not going to thrive. They're not going to be able to make it. They're not going to be able to absorb those nutrients. So you want to make sure that you're giving them a very airy mix. Definitely think sphagnum, perlite, charcoals, barks, anything like that. Anything that's going to create moisture retention and also allow aeration at the same time. Vermiculite is another good one. You could do like vermiculite or stratum with some some perlite. Something along those lines is going to be great. Standard all across the board is just getting some sphagnum moss and some bark, doing 50-50, shoving that in the pot and calling it good with these plants. You can also use the clear orchid pots with the slits on the side when you put your anthurium in there with that bark and sphagnum moss mix. It's going to perfectly mimic what's going on those trees for you for your epiphytic plants. They grow just like bromeliads and orchids, so keep that in mind when you're picking your potting mix and your location. You can slip that little orchid pot into a ceramic pot or like a cache pot type of deal, and that's going to work really well for you as well. Let's talk about watering really quick. This is where anthurium get a little finicky. If you have a mix that's going to hold on to too much water, like straight potting mix, then your anthurium is going to rot. So what you want to do is make sure that you are watering your anthurium consistently. You do not want it to let it dry out completely. It can handle a little bit of dryness though. So what a lot of people like to do is go ahead and top their anthurium with sphagnum moss. You have it in the pot and then you add sphagnum moss around the base of the root system that way. And when you feel that top sphagnum moss starts to get dry, starts to get a little bit crunchy, that means that the underneath sphagnum moss is probably starting to dry out a little bit too. You can water your anthurium then, and then it's going to be perfect for you. It's a fantastic trick. It ups the humidity and it promotes root growth as well. They definitely can get dry rot if they're allowed to dry out too much. Then you would have to remove the root system and reroot them. It's very, very annoying. It also stunts the growth of your plant. It can take a long time to recover from. So you want to make sure that you are using an airy mix and that you're not watering so often. Your plant does not want to just thrive and sit and water the entire time. There are some specific anthurium that can do that. Most anthurium are not great with that. So definitely keep that in mind. A lot of anthurium can start out in a heavy potting mix as well because they have that extra humidity around their root systems. So when you purchase your plant, it's going to come in probably a potting mix, a cocoa peat, or a tree fern type of mix. Definitely make sure that you're changing that up a little bit and change your watering habits. Don't water it too much. Let it dry out slightly. Don't let it dry out completely. When you feel comfortable enough, definitely switch it over to a sphagnum bark type of mix, especially if you have a foliage-based anthurium, not necessarily just a flower-based anthurium. Speaking of what anthurium need to grow, fertilization. Fertilization is a key component to anthurium. Anthurium are constantly getting fed. They're constantly getting fed when they're sitting on their trees. They're absorbing nutrients from the air, they're absorbing nutrients from the tree. Whatever runs down off the tree is going to be absorbed by them. But the key note in this is that it's small amounts at a time. So if you are someone who wants to fertilize your plant and then forget about it for months and you just fertilize it a lot and then leave it, that's not going to work for anthurium. They want to be watered on a regular, and with every watering or every couple waterings, you can give them a little bit of fertilizer, like a micro dose of fertilizer. The smallest amount that you can possibly give, very diluted, definitely give that to them. And they will not throw a fit if they miss a feed or two. They're definitely used to surviving off of a very little bit of nutrients, just being epiphytic plants, so they're not very needy in that department. You can over-fertilize your anthurium though, which is where a problem comes in. A lot of the common fertilizers that are used now on a regular basis are usually higher dosage. They're trying to increase growth of plants and whatnot, which is fantastic. It's just anthurium don't handle that very well. So they need a more diluted version of that. If you give them too much, you will get leaf burn. You'll start to see crisping on the edges and on the tips. You might also see some yellowing. So definitely keep that in mind. Pay attention for that. And you can always flush your plant, just rinse out under the water and just have the excess buildup of the fertilizer washed out, and then give your plant a few days to maybe a month to recover, depending on what is going on. If you start to see a lot of new growth, then maybe give it a little bit, but if it's not doing anything, don't even worry about it. Common pests and diseases that anthurium have, anthurium are very prone to spider mites. Because anthurium tend to struggle quite a bit in our homes because their needs are not met all the way, that calls out to spider mites that they are a delicious weak plant that's going to make an amazing snack to them. So you want to make sure that you're taking care of your plant as best as possible. Keep an eye out for spider mites. Clean your plant leaves regularly. We'll have a whole video out about that, so make sure you subscribe so that you can figure that out. Definitely make sure that you are paying attention to what's going on with your anthurium and keep checking for pests regularly until your plant starts to get really established and is clearly thriving. You've mastered the conditions, then you can worry about it less. Another thing to keep in mind is if your plant is prone to spider mites, you cannot expect a systemic to be able to treat that. So a lot of people, when they're prone to pests, they're going to use some type of a systemic, probably for thrips, generally speaking. But some people think that spider mites can be defeated by a systemic as well. This is not the case. You need a miticide or an insecticidal soap in order to get rid of spider mites. So definitely keep that in mind. Another thing that Antherium are very prone to is because they like a higher humidity environment, they're used to rainforest conditions. When they're all clumped together and they don't have enough airflow around them, they tend to get fungal issues on their leaves. They'll be like bacterial spots, fungus spots, they'll have like molds and things growing on them. Just make sure that they have a good airflow and you'll be perfectly fine, especially if you're using the orchid pot. Just give them space between the other foliage around them. Give them a little bit of a fan if you have a very humid, sticky home. Definitely just make sure that you're paying attention to that. Remove any disease-ridden leaves and treat with a copper fungicide so that way you can get rid of any fungal issues that pop up and it doesn't spread to your other leaves on that plant and the rest of the plants in your collection. So let's talk about humidity really quick. Mentioned it before. High humidity is definitely a must with anthuriums. They do not want to go below 50%. They're used to a tropical rainforest. All that foliage just traps the humidity in there and it's a constant cycle in there. I know it's a lot to take in. There was a lot of information in this video. You don't have to take notes on the entire thing. We've got the whole article over on indoorgardening.com. Definitely check that out and we're always happy to help. Thank you so much for watching. We'll have more informational videos like this, so make sure you subscribe and we'll see you in the next one. Bye!